So last week we had a pretty powerful class, I think. It was not the first, it was, I don't know if it was the third or whatnot in a series of classes where we were talking about um, the Tanya's approach to sadness, and if, in conclusion, if we had to sum up all of those classes and really the whole first part of chapter 26, what the Tanya is telling us is that sadness is not an option. Things might be painful, things might be tough, but sadness is not an option. I'm pretty sure we said this before. Sadness is not a sin. It's not, in the 613 commandments. However, sadness really leads to all bad things. And I think we all know that. We've probably all experienced it. When I'm feeling down, nothing's good coming out of it. And it really should be avoided at all costs. So for anyone who missed any of the last few classes, I encourage you to check out the recording. I'm happy to send you a link if you can't find it in the email. Um, but I really think we kind of concluded that section of the Tanya talking about how to maintain joy um, despite circumstances that are upsetting and difficult. The last part of chapter 26 is still trying to talk about how to maintain joy, but this time the Tanya is going to look at something else. Not external things that make us upset. Hi, Hannah, welcome. And hi, Deborah.
Right.
Um, the second part of chapter 26 is not looking at external things that make us upset, like things that happen and things that seem unfair and things that are painful. This second part of chapter 26 looks at internal sadness. When I start thinking of my life and realizing mistakes that I've made, whether it was today, yesterday, last week, last month, last year, maybe when my kids were little, maybe when I was single, we all have quite a few years to look back on, and no one's life is perfect, and no one does everything perfectly. And we could get into the space where we start thinking about things that we've done negatively, and that really gets us down. So maybe we can figure out how to have the right approach when God makes difficult things happen. But what about when I make bad things happen? Like when I make bad choices, whether I actually saw the bad results of my choices or I'm just feeling really guilty about the things that I've done. Hi, Lorraine. So that's what the second part of chapter 26 is going to talk about. I'm going to pull up the text. Um, it's an interesting approach to tackling this guilt. Okay, this is towards the end of chapter 26. In the printout from the link that I sent in the email, it would be on page 6. As for sadness connected with heavenly matters, one must seek ways and means of freeing oneself of it. So right here, the Tanya tells us, even if the reason I'm sad is a very holy reason, I'm actually sad because I messed up. I'm sad because I didn't give my kids the right education that I should have. I'm sad because I did something that, you know, I know is, a really awful thing, or I know will have really bad repercussions, or I know God really didn't want me to do. Still, sadness is not an option because being sad and dwelling on this is not going to bring me to anywhere good. So now the Tanya is going to tackle it in two different ways. It's going to say, well, there are two different times where I might feel the sadness. Maybe while I'm doing a mitzvah, I'm trying to study Torah, I'm trying to keep Shabbat, I'm trying to do something good, and then I get this thought that tells me, like, oh, who do you think you are? Hey, you haven't done this for the last who knows how many years or months. Like, you think you're going to be all righteous now by doing this good thing? Or maybe I'm trying to study Torah. And while I'm studying Torah, again, I have this thought that like reminds me of remember what you did yesterday, and remember what you did last week, and how awful of a person you are. So the Tanya right away says, if I'm in the middle of doing a mitzvah, it's definitely not okay because we're told that we have to serve God with joy. If I need to serve God with joy, I cannot be serving God while having these nagging thoughts that are really dragging me down. But what about when I'm not in the middle of doing a mitzvah? What if I'm in the middle of work? sitting in the office, trying to, type up my emails, and suddenly I start thinking, oh, what a terrible mistake I made last week, last night, last month, last year. Like, what if I start thinking that I'm really a bad person? We might think that it's a good thing. Sometimes there's a part of us that thinks, like, yeah, if I'm really trying to do the right thing, I'm going to feel really bad about all the awful things I did. And then Tanya tells us something interesting. Tanya says, you should know that if this is happening to you in middle of your workday, it is clearly the evil inclination or the animal soul trying to get you. Because your animal soul that only desires physicality and does not want you, and by extension of that, what we call the evil inclination, that's like that part of the animal soul that's kind of the drive to try to get us to do the negative things, it's not a fool, and it knows that you're not a fool. It knows that if you wake up in the morning and it tries to tell you, well, I know, Deanie, you're feeling all good and inspired because of last night's class. Why don't you still go and do this bad thing? It knows it's not going to get me that way. So it works in a clever way. It starts reminding me that I'm actually not so great. Oh, you think you're so great? You attended this great class last night? Well, don't you remember what you did the other day? And don't you remember all of those other things you did? And the evil inclination knows that once it gets me into that mindset of feeling down, what's going to happen next? Then it's easy. Then it can convince me to do anything. We know, I know I brought this example numerous times, and I hope it doesn't offend anyone, but a lot of people are, very careful with what they eat for various reasons, maybe for health reasons, maybe for, weight loss reasons, whatever it is. And we all, I think most of us, go through these moments where I'm really going to try to stick to this diet. I know it's better for me. It's better for my health, whatever it is. My doctor wants me to be on this diet. And then I start slipping. I accidentally slip. So one of two things can happen. I can like pick up right away and jump back on, or I could be like, well, I already messed up at breakfast. May as well mess up for lunch. I already messed up breakfast and lunch. Like, who even cares anymore? I, I'm not even getting anywhere. This is never really going to work for me. And the same is true with how we feel about spiritual matters. I want to read it inside. This applies to the time of one's divine service. No, that this applies to the time of one's divine service is self-evident, for one must serve God with joy and gladness of heart. So if it's in the middle of doing a mitzvah, for sure, got to stop it because I need to do a mitzvah happily. But even when one who is occupied in business and worldly affairs, should there descend upon him any sadness or anxiety about heavenly matters during his business affairs, it is certainly a trick of the evil inclination, which saddens him ostensibly for spiritual reasons, in order to lure him afterwards into lusts, God forbid, as it is well known, because it doesn't feel good to be sad. It doesn't feel good to be in a place of like, feeling bad about myself. And so my natural instinct is I'm going to try to make myself better, whether it's by eating the whole cheesecake or by, going to that place I'm not supposed to go, or by just turning on the TV and binging on Netflix for the next, 15 hours, whatever it is. When I'm feeling bad about myself, I'm going to try to find an escape. And usually the escape is not very productive. So wait, does Tanya say you're never supposed to feel bad about things that you did? Like, isn't there a good guilt that actually gets us to change? And so here the Tanya is going to address that. But first, this paragraph. For if it were not so, that this depression is the doing of the Yetzer Hara, what if someone says, no, it's not possible, I'm really very righteous, and I think the reason I'm feeling so guilty is because I'm learning a lot more, and now I'm feeling more guilty because I realize all the things that I did bad. Tanya says, well, if it wasn't the evil inclination that was actually talking to me right now, from where would a genuine sadness, one that is derived from love or fear of God, come to him in the middle of his business affairs? The Tanya is telling us that real sadness over mistakes comes not from dwelling inwards, but from dwelling on God. When I look at God and I study about God and I say, wow, God is so great. God is so amazing. Oh, I feel so awful that I failed him sometimes. That's one way of feeling guilty about things that I've done. But when I'm looking inwards and saying, oh, I'm an awful person, I'm so this, I'm so that, and my sadness starts coming from looking inwardly in that way, kind of like self-focused, that's definitely the evil inclination. Because as Tanya says, I'm in the middle of shopping. Like, I'm not sitting and thinking about God. If I'm thinking about God and I'm starting to feel like, oh man, I wish I could have done things better, it's one thing. But if I'm in the middle of shopping or, I don't know, doing whatever I need to do in the middle of work and suddenly I start feeling bad, it's not coming from a holy place. Like, let's not fool ourselves. Whether the depression settles upon him suddenly during his service of God in Torah study or prayer, or when he is not engaged thus, but with his material affairs, this is what he should consider. Okay, so what do? I'm in the middle of my workday and I start feeling awful about whatever it is that I did, you know, this lifetime, last lifetime, whatever it is, whatever I'm thinking about. Here's what I need to tell myself. Now is not the proper time for genuine sadness or even worry over grave sins, God forbid. I need to tell myself it's okay. I feel bad about this. Push it away. Now is not the time. There are times that I need to make appointments with myself, so to speak, to sit down, think about my mistakes, and figure out how to correct them. It's not a middle of the day. If anything, it's at the end of the day when I'm getting ready for bed. I take a few moments and I, do a little recap, or I write in my diary or whatever it is. I sit and I focus on what I did right today, what I did wrong today, what I need to fix. Perhaps it's at the end of a week. It's customary that Thursday night is that night that if somebody wants to focus on their week, we don't do it on Friday night because that's when we're supposed to be joyous for Shabbat. But if I need to sit and, reckon with myself to, figure out what I need to fix, Thursday night might be a good night. At the end of the month, before Rosh Chodesh, might be a good time. And definitely at the end of the year, we're coming upon the month of Elul. That is the month, that's the time for it. But the idea is that there are designated times. It cannot be all the time. Even if I'm doing this on a nightly basis, it should be quick, swift. It's not something I should sit and dwell on. And the focus should be not the feeling bad, but the focus should be on understanding what went wrong. Clearly, I'm regretting it, deciding how I'm going to correct it, and done. I move on. I don't sit and dwell in it because we know that real teshuvah is the sincere regret and the sincere commitment to changing things in the future. And it could honestly take a second, or it could take 10 seconds. But just the sitting and truly figuring out what I did wrong and what I'm going to do differently, I know that I am, from God's perspective, I'm forgiven. I have a clean slate. I'm ready to go into my day, and that should give me joy. So just in conclusion, before we take questions, it is okay and it is appropriate to feel bad about things we've done wrong, but not when the thought descends upon us randomly in the middle of the day. At specific times, I could sit down, I could focus on it, deal with it, and then move on. And it's a little bit, they say, how do you know if I'm doing it right or wrong? If I go back to the food example, if I sit down at the end of the day and I start thinking, all right, now it's time to really own up about what I ate right today, what I didn't eat right. And I pull out my journal, I write, these meals were okay, these meals were not okay. The question is what happens afterwards? If the direct result of me sitting and doing this little calculation is, oh my God, I feel awful. Let me go out and get a dozen donuts because what an awful person I am that I ate so badly today. Then I didn't do it right. If the direct result is, you know what, tomorrow morning I'm setting up an appointment with my nutritionist, or tomorrow morning I am going to the gym, or tomorrow morning I'm going to make a meal plan for the week. If the result of my momentary introspection is that I'm fixing things, then it was good. It was healthy, momentary sadness, so to speak. But if I'm just dwelling in it and it's just making me feel awful, I'm not doing it right. It's really that evil inclination that's trying to drag me down, and it's succeeding in dragging me down. Because it's not going to get me to do bad things unless I start feeling really bad about myself. Yes, Lorraine, you want to share something?
So, a question and a thought.
Yeah.
So the thought is that Sunday, Tisha B'Av, isn't that one of those days that you're allowed to just feel bad? Because I was studying all day and watching videos and reading and doing all this, and I came across one on Chabad website about a rabbi was talking about why we're in exile. And I don't know if you know that video. I got so emotional, like sobbing emotional because of all the horrible things that we've talked about before. Um, you know, this is not news, but right now, if that's the philosophy, we are so exiled. Like if that's the philosophy that we're using to understand what's happening in our world, um, you know, it's as bad as it can get, right? I mean, the video that was released, and I could go on and on, and the little girls. I mean, we've done all the examples. It's just horrible all around. And so I was just sobbing and fasting, and then Sarah told me the real time, and I had to fast another hour. I thought that if I stopped at 6, I could eat at 7 because that was like, that's my 25 hours. And Sarah's like, "Oh, you probably don't want me to say this, but it's actually 9:08." And I'm like, "Oh my God." Sorry. But it
So,
did give a little comic relief to an otherwise really like emotional day, right? So I don't know. I mean, maybe you're going to tell me, "Oh, you're not supposed to cry on that day either." But
okay.
I don't know. I spent the day like really learning. And anyway, okay, so
So
that's
I'm happy you brought that up. I think it's important to make a distinction again. The Tanya is not telling us never to be sad. Sadness is a normal emotion, right? It's something that we feel and we express, and it's okay to cry when the time is right. Like, it's King Solomon says, it's a time to cry and there's a time to rejoice, and there's time for everything. The Tanya is specifically talking about a depressive sadness, not the type, sometimes if you need to see a psychiatrist and take medication, that's something different. I wouldn't say the Tanya is a substitute for that, but that type of sadness that just gets you down. When I start thinking, what an awful person I am just, the worst sister, friend, mother, daughter, wife, whatever. I am just did think so many things wrong. I know sometimes I talk to people and they're like, you know, I realize I wish I would have given my kids more Judaism when they were little. I didn't do it. Ugh, look at my kid now doing X, Y, and Z. I know it's really my fault. I should have, done it differently. And just sitting and dwelling on the mistakes that I made and feeling bad about it. So, sadness, when there's a sad, I think the distinction is the sadness that leads one to a depressive state where I don't want to do anything. If I'm studying, well, firstly, Tisha B'Av is, like you said, it's a designated sad day. It's not time for us to become depressed, but it's a time for us to dwell on the sad events in our history that led us to where we are today and the sad things that we're experiencing, and to be sad about that. But then you know what happens afterwards. The afternoon of Tisha B'Av, as we get closer to the fast ending, we start looking forward and we start learning about the future redemption, and we start thinking about how things are going to change and how we're going to improve in our love of our fellow Jew. So, again, the litmus test to the sadness is, what is the sadness doing for me? Is this sadness making me, pull my blanket over my head and not wanting to engage with life? That's not a good sadness.
so
Is this
I would
sadness
say,
just,
yeah.
experiencing an emotion in the moment or reacting to a situation? That's a different type of sadness.
So I would say this is just me, and we have, a couple doctors on here who can challenge me. But I would say for me, you know, with all that I was learning and taking in, I don't know, a good 15-minute hard cry where you don't want to see anybody. That kind of cry, and then you're over it and it's been released.
That's
I
totally
actually
fine.
the next morning, like I was cleansed. I felt like Wow, that was really a good day. I did absolutely nothing but focus on learning and watching a million videos and doing whatever and not eating and
Right. So honestly, that's your litmus test. Your litmus test is what happened then? Was it I cried, I experienced this emotion, I washed it out of me, and then I moved on? I mean,
yeah,
the other part of it is that it was Tisha B'Av, which only happens once a year. So if you get into this mode on the 9th of Av, or God forbid, when you're at a funeral, or there are times for sadness.
yeah.
Specifically, Tanya is saying, how do you stop yourself from just being in a depressive state that stops you from doing what you're supposed to do? Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
Um, I'm going to go back to differentiate between what we were talking about in previous weeks and the kind of sadness that you're talking about today. And for me, I have to say that it's much easier for me to reconcile with something that I've done wrong because I can do tshuva. I have some control. Okay, I can do tshuva. I can make sure that I don't repeat the same mistake. I can learn from it. Um, and so that's something because I have some control about the direction that I'm going to take, it's much easier for me to deal with than sadness over the videos of the hostages that were released this week that were so horrific, which I can do nothing. I mean, what can I do? So, I can um, try to add a mitzvah, but it's not going to impact them,
It
you know,
will.
I'm
It will. It
well,
will.
okay,
Our
but
actions impact.
I don't have any control over it,
Right.
whereas I do over myself. And so for me, there's a much greater effort at taking the leap of faith when it comes to those kinds of sadnesses than something that I've caused it in my own life.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that. I think that people experience it differently. There are definitely people who are so full of guilt and shame. I mean, Jewish guilt, the whole concept of Jewish guilt is a real thing. Like people feel very guilty. I mean, personal confession. Okay. So in this last week, it was interesting because I had this chapter of Tanya on my mind. But in this last week, those of you who have parented young children in the summer, let's just say there are good moments and there are not such good moments. And it was at the end of one day, really at like late at night after one day, that I was like sitting and thinking about my day and just thinking about all the things that I did wrong. I should have done this better. I should have done that better. If I was a really good mom, I would have taken them here and I would have stopped that tantrum before it started and, whatever. The next morning, I woke up and I'm going about my day and I realize I can't focus because all I'm thinking about is what an awful mother. And it's like, and the thoughts don't stop there. It's like, not just I was an awful mother yesterday, I'm probably been an awful mother this entire summer vacation. And oh my goodness, if only my kid had this kind of mother or that kind of mother, this one would have been better off and that one would have been better off. And I'm literally like trying to like do things that I needed to get done. And I just couldn't because my thoughts were just, and I was like, 1 second, aren't we in the middle of studying this chapter of Tanya? This is exactly what the Tanya is talking about. When these thoughts befall you in the middle of the day, I literally had to stop myself and say, these are not holy thoughts. These are not thoughts of a wonderful mother trying to be a better mother. These are thoughts coming directly from my evil inclination that's really trying to trap me and get me to make further bad decisions. So I need to push these thoughts away and I need to save the time when I sit down, whether, tonight or on a certain night when I want to sit down, as we do every so often, and try to figure out what do I need to do better? What do I need to change for this child, for that child? That will be the time to deal with it. But the fact that it's just overwhelming me and not letting me live my life and do things properly, that's not coming from a good place. So I think the overall theme, it's fun, it's interesting because in a way the two parts of chapter 26 don't seem to be connected. It's like Jerry said, it's like the things that God does that it's like who could even understand these, crazy things that we experience in our world, and then the mistakes that I made, they don't seem to fit in the same chapter. I think that the common theme with both of them is being able to like look at the world through this lens of God's in charge. I have my things that I need to focus on. I need to do what I need to do, and I can't allow things to get me down. I can experience a range of emotions, but I need to always have my path clear ahead of me, know where I'm going, and not allow myself to just be derailed by sadness. Sarah, you want to share something?
Okay, yeah. So I've been going back and forth battling if I even want to say this or not, because I feel like I'm a bit of a walking contradiction here. On the one hand, I recognize and understand there's no labels, right? I'm a bad Jew, I'm a Orthodox Jew, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're a Jew, is a Jew, is a Jew. Okay, great. And at the same time, and I've told you this before, there's a statement in Hebrew, Dalifne mi ata omed. Know before whom you stand. And I am literally supposed to be of the mindset, like literally know, that's the first word, da is to know. And I cannot help but feel like a bad Jew at that point because I feel forced to come to this understanding that by definition, I am standing literally in front of God. And here I am on a daily basis, literally admitting, yep, I'm not, I'm never going to be perfect because by definition, only God's perfect. That is a very, very challenging thought. For me, as somebody who's growth oriented, you can say, great, grow. But there's like no goal achievement per se. And I find that to be incredibly sad.
So I'm so happy you bring that up because that's actually the exact topic of chapter 27. Chapter 26 focuses mostly on mistakes that I've done that take me down. Chapter 27 goes into the thoughts that go on through my mind. All these things that I feel like I worked on myself. We all have, those moments where, I spend time, maybe it was a few weeks, maybe it was a few months, maybe it was a few years, maybe it's been a lifetime that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to be better in this area, I'm trying to be better in that area. Maybe I'm even teaching, particular things. And then it's like I forget even before I do something wrong, I just have these thoughts that I really want to do something awful. And if you're human, it happens to you. Maybe it's thoughts of dishonesty, like, I wish I could. I would even if I would never ever do it, let's say. But oh, don't I wish I can do whatever. Maybe it's thoughts of getting really mad at someone and like, I just really wish I can like make her lose her job. Like how many times do people think thoughts like that when they get really mad at somebody? Or maybe it's thoughts of immorality. Everyone has thoughts that overtake them at different times, and even assuming that I never go there. And I don't allow, of course, if I go there, then, I definitely have the shame. But the Tanya is going to tell us, even if I never go there, there's a tremendous shame that a person feels that, like, oh my God, what's the point of all of this? Like you said, I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never actually going to get there. Every day I wake up, I'm fighting this battle again. You win some, you lose some. What's the point? If I'm never actually going to make it, if even after all these years of really trying, I haven't made it and I don't think I'm actually going to make it, what's the point?
I'm still a Benoni.
I Halavaya Benoni.
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Of course, of course.
Right. So does that kind of capture your question?
Yeah, it's the translation of fear versus awe of God. So that awe can be very um I'll say inspiring and positive, or it could also be fearful in the sense of like, my gosh, this is so uh perfection and I am so not. There is an element of pessimism and sadness that I feel personally.
Okay, so then let's jump right into chapter 27 because
Okay, sorry.
because we basically have concluded. I just want to share like one of the last lines of chapter 26, which I thought was pretty powerful. Let me see. Here. So this is telling us that when I take those moments, those predetermined moments where I literally make an appointment in my calendar and I say, now is the time for me to sit and figure out where I'm holding with my Judaism, what I've done right, what I've done wrong, what I'm going to fix, what am I doing different tomorrow morning. It was actually it. There's a saying about Hasidim of old that they would do teshuva every night, and you know what their teshuva looked like? They would sit down and they would say the word in Yiddish, and I'll translate: "Morgen wird sein gar anders." Tomorrow is going to be completely different, and they said it with complete sincerity. That's it. That was their entire teshuva. Because that is what teshuva is. It's really committing. We're not talking about when I say things and I think something else and, I don't really mean. When I truly mean it, when I really sit down, I take a moment, I feel horrible about, my mistakes. I figure out where it is that I slipped, and I make up my mind tomorrow I'm going to do things differently. That is teshuva. And at that moment, so here's the words that I highlighted: he should believe with perfect faith that God has erased his sin as he pardons abundantly. And I think this is where a lot of people make the mistake. It's like, okay, I did teshuva. I feel really bad about it. I'm going to do things different tomorrow, but I'm still such an awful person. And the Tanya reminds us, God forgives. God is the all-loving Father that is just waiting for us to do that teshuva. The moment that we sincerely regret and sincerely decide to do things differently, he forgives us. And if I do the same again tomorrow, guess what? He forgives again. And one of the greatest differences between God and the way God forgives and the way humans forgive is we know that if someone asks me for forgiveness one time, two times, three times, four times, at a certain point, I run out of patience. And it's like, you know what? Like, stop messing up. I can't forgive you that many times. It's never like that with God. He always forgives every time I ask for forgiveness. And so it takes a certain level of faith to believe that the moment that I did this teshuva, God has forgiven me. I have a clean slate and I'm ready to start again tomorrow. And with that, we'll move on to chapter 27, in which we're going to talk about when I feel down, like we said, not because of mistakes that I've done in the past, but I feel down because of all these. I know what's really going on in my head. No one else knows. I'm so happy no one knows what's going on in my head because, we're all capable of acting a certain way, and then no one knows what we're thinking about, what we're wishing for, what we hope for, what we wrote in our journals, what we dreamt about at night. And those really have a way of taking us down. Yes, Lorraine, before we move on to 27.
Okay. Well, I feel like that there was a lot still on the table last time from 26, and I'm wondering, do you not want to go back there and touch
We
that? Because
we
I felt
could.
like we were in a really good discussion about it, and then we all looked up and went, "Oh my God, it's, we're late." So, um,
So we could go back. Why don't we
because I
why
feel
don't we
like,
do this?
mhm.
Why don't we do the first section of 27, just for those who kind of want to move on to this section, and then why don't we stop, at like 10 to 9, and we'll bring up any additional questions that came up from 26 or 27. Does that make sense? It continues to be under the same umbrella of these like emotions and these experiences that take us down and stop us from being happy, being joyous, being able to do things with alacrity. So I'm hoping that we're not totally deviating off topic. It's like a progression. So let's just do the first few paragraphs of 27. Okay. If, however, his sadness doesn't stem from anxiety over sins that he has committed in the past, but from the fact that sinful thoughts and desires enter his mind. So then what do I do? My mind's a mess. I wish I was going to say, I wish you knew, but I wish you didn't know what's going on in my mind at certain times, right? Our mind, we're very thankful that it's the innermost part of us that we're not sharing with others. But sometimes our mind's a mess and we feel awful. I mean, could you imagine just feeling, even if I want to take, it's a silly example, but I'm not preaching to you guys. I'm talking to myself. I struggle with all these same things, just like everyone else. And sometimes when I'm like struggling with it, I was like, you know, who do you think you are? You're teaching Tanya and you're having all the same experiences. It's we all go through those things. Like things are tough and we want to do things that maybe aren't the right thing, and we don't wake up with these like all holy desires to only study and pray all day. You know, how many of us just are just in the mood of dropping things and sometimes just, I don't know, binging on who knows what, you know? So we all experience these. Here, the Tanya is talking about how awful I feel when I experience these. I'm trying so hard to do the right thing. And then, like, what? Who do I even think I am? Who am I even pretending to be if I'm still struggling with all of these things? So now the Tanya is going to differentiate. Do these thoughts occur to me while I am going about my regular life? Or do these thoughts occur to me while I'm, say, trying to pray? The first section is going to talk about when I am trying to go about my daily life and I have these thoughts, like Sarah said, what's the point of it? I'm trying and trying and I'm trying to get inspired, and I was inspired, but then 5 minutes later, I'm not inspired anymore. Where are we going with all of this? So if these thoughts occur to him not during his service of God, but while he is occupied with his own affairs and with mundane matters and the like, Tanya says he should, on the contrary, be happy in his lot. For although these sinful thoughts enter his mind, he averts his attention from them. And here, and I hope, Sarah, this answers your question, the Tanya is trying to change our perspective here. We're used to looking at things as there's a goal of where I'm trying to get to, and then I'm constantly working on taking steps towards that goal. So every day should be better than the day before, and every year should be better than the year before. And at some point, I want to be able to reach that goal. And then I feel like I made it. Even if maybe there's another goal after that, but I want to feel like I made it to the goal. Here, the Tanya is telling us that actually you have to change the way you look at things, because the goal is not to reach the goal. The struggle itself, that's the goal. If the goal was for us to get to a place where eventually we are, so to speak, perfect people who have mastered all the commandments and mastered everything God wants us to do, then basically the goal for us would be to turn into a tzaddik or into an angel. And God didn't give us that capacity. The Tanya spelled out very early on that most people don't have the capacity to be a tzaddik. At most, we have the capacity to be a Benoni, which is we will constantly have thoughts. We will constantly have struggles, but every time we go to battle, we will win that battle. And 5 minutes later, there's going to be another battle, and then another battle. Now, instead of thinking, oh my goodness, what's the point? I'm never getting to the victory. When I realized the victory is every win. That's why it kind of touches upon what the Tanya says. The whole purpose of creation was God wanted a constant battle between the light and the dark, and the light should overcome. And he couldn't give this battle to a tzaddik, because a tzaddik doesn't battle with darkness. He couldn't give this battle to the angels. The angels don't battle with darkness. The beauty that we can accomplish every time with every victory, that's what God's hoping for. And soon the Tanya is going to quote from the story in Genesis that we're all hopefully familiar with, when Isaac wanted to bless his oldest child. His oldest child, Esau, it says Isaac was blind, and he didn't know that Esau was really an awful person, and he sent him out to go and prepare food. And then, meanwhile, Rebecca knew what was going on, and she arranged for Jacob to get in first and get the blessings. When you read the details of that story, you see that Isaac is asking Esau for very specific foods. He tells him exactly what he wants on the menu. This type of food and that type of food. Tells him, mat'amim, make for me different flavors, different types of foods. If you read it, you think like, oh my goodness, this is like one of the patriarchs. Like, this is what he's busy with, choosing the details of his menu of exactly what he wants his son to prepare for him. Now, obviously, we know that when we delve into the details of Torah, no word in Torah is superfluous, and every word has so much depth to it. One of the Kabbalistic teachings about that section of the Torah is the idea of mat'amim, different types of foods. Just like a human, there's two general categories of food that people can enjoy. There are sweet foods and there are savory foods. Sweet foods doesn't take, it's very straightforward. It tastes sweet. You give it to a baby, they lick it, the ice cream, boom. Like I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on a recorded thing, but my 9-month-old already loves ice cream. And not going to say who fed it to him, but he learned very quickly that he likes ice cream. It doesn't take much. Most little kids won't like spicy foods. It takes time to develop a more sophisticated palate where you can appreciate the spicy food. You would think, why is spicy food good? It's spicy. It's not positive, but actually the spice in its right amount gives us a different type of pleasure. The Tanya here is going to compare there are two ways of giving pleasure to God. There's the pleasure that God gets from sweet work, which is the work of tzaddikim, the work that's all positive, the work that requires no struggle, just goodness, just positivity. That's sweet, and that's beautiful. God loves that. But at the same time, God loves savory treats. You know what savory treats for God are? When somebody was facing a negative thought, a negative impulse, and boom, they won over it. And that's how they created the treat. That's like God's savory treats. And you know who's able to produce those kind of treats? Not a tzaddik, not an angel, only us, regular people. Regular people who actually have sinful thoughts and actually have all different types of desires and wake up in the morning and have a lot of other things on our to-do list besides, studying Torah and doing mitzvahs. We're the ones who are capable of producing these savory treats that God really wants and enjoys. So now when I encounter struggles in my day-to-day, instead of saying, oh, I'm never getting to the destination, I have to realize the destination is this battle. I'm a foot soldier. The goal of the foot soldier is not to ultimately become king. The goal of the foot soldier is to be a foot soldier and to keep winning at every battle. And when I know that this is my place and this is my unique position, that in many ways is more unique than the angel's position and the tzaddik's position because they can't do this stuff, then the Tanya here says, when that thought enters my mind, instead of being taken down and saying, oh, can't believe I'm wanting that again, I actually delight in the opportunity to say, guess what? I have the opportunity to create another savory treat for God. I'm going to push this desire away. I won today's battle. I got another, victory point, and the Tanya is going to describe, I'm able to bring the godly light more into the world. And that itself is the goal. So instead of saying I'm fighting a battle to reach an ultimate goal, when I realize the battle itself is the goal, I'm going to be happy. Because right now I have the opportunity to do a mitzvah. And there is a mitzvah in the Torah that says, Lo tatur achrei levavchem, do not follow the lusts of your heart. A tzaddik doesn't get to fulfill that mitzvah. I get to fulfill that mitzvah right now. And for that, I need to be joyous. Sarah, go ahead.
Wait, before you go down, can you go up?
Yeah.
Because there was this paragraph in the top and that exactly connects to what you just said. Keep going up, up, up.
Up.
Something
Okay.
about anxiety or whatever. Here, if however his sadness does not stem from anxiety over sins that he has committed, but from the fact that sinful thoughts and desires enter his mind. So does that mean, so remember we were talking about not kosher, we use the word asur, not as
Bound.
right, it's bound. It's not that it's, I don't want to say treif. It just means bound spiritually. So I'm not going to pretend like I know the reason, but if one of the reasons that, for example, kosher, we're supposed to have animals that have split hooves and chew its cud, and we don't um, eat birds of prey and killer whatever animals and whatnot. But if I am whatever watching TV and I see a commercial for a cheeseburger or something that I know is not kosher, but the desire is it exists, right? It's put there by the evil inclination. Okay, so is what you're saying, and forgive me if I'm just sort of piecing this in real time, are you saying these sinful thoughts and desires enter his mind, which is to say the fact that he even had this sort of arousal, like, ooh, cheeseburger, and for me to then say something like, okay, well, let me go, I'm making this up. I'm going to go to a not kosher restaurant menu, and I'm going, which is sort of a bad thing, but I'm going to use it to say, okay, but now I know how to supplement or replace certain ingredients, and then I can do it myself in a kosher way. Are you saying that I found a way around the evil thought and desire?
I'm not sure I'm fully understanding what you're saying, but from what I understand in the Tanya here, the Tanya is saying, firstly, at that moment that I see the advertisement for the cheeseburger and I salivate and desire it, and I say, I will not get that. At that moment, I did a mitzvah. And instead of feeling guilty, like, oh, why do I desire cheeseburgers? I wish I was one of those holier people that didn't even care for this stuff. Instead, I need to say, lucky me. I get to have the opportunity to say no to a craving for something that God doesn't want. There's a story of, I believe it was the Tzemach Tzedek, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, who was the third Chabad Rebbe. He had a student who came to him once and said, Rebbe, I don't know what to do. I don't have a desire to study Torah. I can't. Just not interested. And the Rebbe looked at him and said, well, then what should I do? I have a desire to study Torah. In other words, what he was telling him is we're facing an equal struggle. Like the fact that I want to study Torah means that when I study Torah, I don't get to do the mitzvah of not following the lusts of my heart. I don't have the opportunity to create these savory treats for God. Your challenge is that you don't want to study Torah. And now you're going to work on studying Torah despite what you feel. And then you can create a treat for God despite what your heart desires. And Sarah, I think that looking at the non-kosher menu and coming up with alternatives, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if that helps enhance your level of kosher observance and your level of joy in keeping kosher.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't plaster it all over my fridge or my kitchen, but to sit and consult a non-kosher menu and try to kosherize it, I think that's
Right.
beautiful.
Meaning you're taking the challenge and you're wrestling with it, like you're saying, but you're trying to at least I am trying to find that goal to say, I got the goal, like I got the thing. So instead of saying, oh man, I just sat there lusting after a thing that I can never have, I'm finding a way to not just deal with the struggle, but also sort of satisfy that how do you say it, the desire to
Yeah.
have something that maybe
So,
in theory I shouldn't be having, but
so I
it's not
think
real.
that so one of the words, and I wasn't sure if we're going to get to it tonight, but there's a word in Aramaic that's brought up in this chapter called eskafia. Eskafia means restraint, holding back. And the Tanya here is going to say that every time I hold back, I'm exercising this muscle, and eskafia is a muscle, because you see that the more you hold back, the easier it becomes to hold back. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but there are, people who really, really work on themselves and really work to follow the ways of the Tanya and to be in control of their animal soul. They really work on exercising iskafia a lot, even with things that are permitted. So, and we probably mentioned this a long time ago, but when they're sitting down at a delicious dinner and a really good dessert is brought before them that's fully kosher and fully permissible, they will purposely delay their gratification for a few minutes and eat it when it's a few minutes later, just to exercise that muscle of I can control myself. That's the concept of iskafia. Iskafia is being able to control and say that looks really good, I'm not going to have it. If I'm able to do it with permissible things, it's good it's good exercise because then when I face something that's not permissible, it's easier for me to say, well, I don't just eat everything that I want, right? I'm able to hold back. But getting back to the Tanya here, basically, we're going to stop right here. At this point, chapter 27 told us that firstly, don't be taken down when you're faced with, thoughts of doing things that are wrong. Actually rejoice. Feel so lucky that you have the opportunity to do this, that others don't have the. This reminds me of a story of actually the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Someone came to him and had a long talk with the Rebbe about his girlfriend who's not Jewish. And now he's really, really struggling. He's really working on every part of Judaism. He's able to make steps in everything, but he can't drop his girlfriend. Like, he really likes her. He really wants her. He wants to marry her. And the Rebbe, looked at him and listened to him. And he said later, he said he felt such compassion he felt like the Rebbe really heard him out. And then the Rebbe said to him, you know what? I'm jealous of you because I've never had that struggle. So that's the Tanya's approach here. Rejoice in the struggle because the struggle is our purpose. Our purpose is to struggle and to overcome, and to struggle and to overcome. And if I failed and I didn't overcome, guess what? Tomorrow I get to struggle again. And that alone gives God the greatest joy, even if I don't make it to, point X. And so definitely I cannot be taken down by just these thoughts. We'll continue next time where Tanya goes on to say that actually, if you really think about it, when you get taken down by your negative thoughts, it's actually really coming from arrogance. Because if I feel bad, say, I can talk for myself, but if I start beating myself up over, why am I having such horrible thoughts? I mean, I'm teaching this chapter in Tanya, and I should know better than to have, negative thoughts of feeling like, not, not an ideal mother. That's actually arrogant because the assumption is I should be perfect. I should be better than this. I should be higher than the struggle, and I shouldn't be struggling. Because in my mind, I think I'm basically reached the tzaddik level. If I was honest with myself, as long as I'm not a tzaddik, I will always be plagued by my animal soul's desires. The only ones who are not plagued by animal soul desires are perfect people, tzaddikim, angels. At the giving of the Torah, when Moses went up, it says Moses went up to heaven. He was there for 40 days, at the top of the mountain, and he was in the heavenly spheres, and he was conversing with the angels. And at the end of 40 days, the angels look at him and they say, what are you doing here, you human? And he said, well, I'm here to take the Torah and bring it down to the Jewish people. And the angels said, what? God, how would you allow this? How would you take these awful, evil people? They're so sinful. They make so many mistakes. They mess up so many times. This is your precious Torah. Like, this is what you created the whole world for. You really going to allow them to take it down there and mess it up so badly? And God said to Moshe, this is what the Medrash says, God said to Moshe, you answer them. And Moshe turned to the angels and he said, the Torah says you should not steal. Have you ever had a desire to steal? The Torah says, honor your parents. Do you have parents whom you struggle to honor? And he went on and gave them different examples. And he said, and so therefore, I'm bringing the Torah down to humankind because that's whom the Torah was written for. The Torah was not written for angels. It was written for people who really actually struggle. And that's the point that this part of the chapter is making. We're going to stop right here. And as promised, we can address questions from chapter 26 or anything we've covered so far in 27. Lorraine, you wanted to ask something on 26?
I have so many new thoughts from 27, and I knew that would happen.
Back to the idea that difficult things happen and we can't let them take us down. And we
Yeah.
approached it from multiple angles. That's what 26 was.
So I think the thing that I struggled with was, in my mind, when negative things happen, that's because man has free will. And we were talking about when negative things happen, God wish those to happen because nothing happens that God doesn't want to bring to us as one of these struggles, one of these challenges. I get it, which is why I like 20, I like 27. um, but I feel like that there's two opposing thoughts, right? Either you believe in this God who's wishing, and I don't even want to put the two in the same sentence, because these are horrific things. You either believe in a God that would do that, or you believe that it's humans doing that, and it's human error and human evilness, and that part of their challenge to for all of us is to witness that.
I think you're asking, it's a very common question. It's a very famous question. It's really, it could be asked in many different ways, but it's really how do we reconcile God being in control of everything? Nothing happens without him desiring it to happen. How do we reconcile that with the fact that humans have free will? And so if someone does something evil, clearly they chose to do something evil, then how do we say that God planned for that evil to happen? Right?
Yes. Or
Um,
wanted, I would even go further, wanted it to happen.
right, right.
I mean, because that's what we were talking about. And then my mind goes to all the horrific things that are currently happening. And how could what I believe is God, Hashem, Adonai, keep going, all these beautiful words that light up your heart and your soul and your mind and your being, how could that want what's happening?
Right. So if
The
we were
evil
to,
word, right? How? It doesn't even make sense to put those in the same sentence for me. That's where I struggle.
so I think I hear you. I'm going to repeat the question for whoever asked. How do we reconcile the fact that people make really bad choices? And then we also say that everything happens is because God wants it to happen. So in that case, we would be saying that God wants Hamas to kidnap people, right? How do we say that about an all-loving God? And then if God actually wants that, then maybe Hamas are not evil because God wanted it to happen. They apparently didn't choose to do it. So, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this topic. I want to answer it briefly with the idea that it's very important to differentiate. There's two levels of things that are happening. They're intertwined, but they're independent. There is God wanting things to happen and making things happen. And then there's people choosing to do the right or the wrong thing. Almost like God writes the script, but he doesn't force you to take any particular part. And God decided anyone that something bad happened to them, God wants it. Why God wants it? That we have to go back to last class. How could God want something so evil? That's God's perspective on the world. From the godly perspective, it's something good that we can't understand. Those who chose to take that role in the play are 100% responsible for their actions. If we think back to the story of Purim, where Mordecai speaks to Esther, and he tells Esther, what does he tell her? He said, our people are going to be annihilated. And, he wanted her to intervene and speak to the king. And she told Mordecai, I can't, I'm going to be killed. Mordecai sent her back a message and he said, look, our people are going to be saved either way. The question is, are you going to be involved? Like, do you want to take this part of the script? So similarly, with the evil things that happen, everyone is 100% responsible for their actions. But if, person A wouldn't have pulled the trigger or wouldn't have crashed and, God forbid, killed person B's life would have ended at that exact moment, regardless. God has a million different ways to make it happen. And this is where I found that line from Ditsa Or in the interview so powerful when she said, my son's not in the hands of Hamas. He's in the hands of Hashem. And it's so, on one hand, we see the videos and I couldn't even watch it. I just saw some screenshots that came out in the last few days. When you think of that and you think like, there's no way in the world God wants this, right? How could God want something like this? At the same time, like hearing that confidence of this is God, God is the one who allowed the Holocaust to happen. It wasn't, where was he? He was right there. Why he did it? As long as I'm human, I will never understand. The people who made it happen from a human perspective, oh my goodness, they are 100% responsible and they should be persecuted for their actions. Does that answer your question? Jerry, go ahead.
But Dini, isn't there also a concept of God hiding his face, mastirat panav, that he's there, but how does that play into it?
I think this is exactly what it is. If we say that God is having those hostages be in the tunnels, where is God? Where is he? Mastirat panav. He's hiding his face in that moment. In the deepest, darkest moments, God is so hidden that it appears that only evil is in control.
But how can that be?
How could it be that God hides himself?
Yeah, how can it be that he hides himself so that people who are so totally innocent are suffering such horror?
So I think there's two parts to that. Firstly, forget hiding himself, how could God want innocent people to suffer such horror? Nobody, no matter what they did, you can't explain that kind of, evil as justified for anybody, let alone these, innocent young 20-year-olds. So that's going back to the question of how does God want this to happen? How does God desire a Holocaust? How is it that in God's script this makes sense? And that's when I accept the limit of my understanding. It's like God told Moshe, he said, you'll see my face, but my back, what's behind the scenes, even you, Moshe, you'll never see. It's like sorry, no. Am I mixing up the words? He says, you'll see my back. You'll never actually see my face. Seeing things exactly the way I see them, even Moshe can never see. Like we explained, like the beautiful tapestry. You look at the back of the tapestry and it looks like a mess, like a real mess. Like how in the world can you explain that this is something beautiful, something that people would hang up in their house and pay money for? Well, if you look at it from the other side, you see something gorgeous. But so long as we are limited humans, God says you will never see my face, my perspective, or how I see things, that you'll never see. That you'll have to wait for the future redemption. Arlene, by the way, I know it's after 9. If anyone has to go, have a wonderful night and a wonderful week, but happy to stay on. Yes, Arlene.
When you talk about what someone's fate is, and they are going to die when God wants them to die, and then you talk about the role that people play in God's script of our world. So someone who chooses to be the bearer of the fate. Now, the way they choose to handle it, is that in their hands? So that if somebody was going to die and Hamas did not take the role, become the character that did these god-awful things that eventually led up to their death, would their death have been peaceful? You know, is it in the hands of the perpetrator to affect the way somebody passes?
So that's when we go back to the teaching that at every single moment, the world is being recreated. So every single moment, the place that I am and the things that I'm experiencing are divinely ordained. So not just, the person who pulled the trigger versus the person who was run over by a car, but the fact every moment that this person is undergoing torture is also within God's control. God, for a reason that we cannot fathom, in God's script, this person was going to go through hell on earth for X amount of days, X amount of minutes, X amount of seconds, something that we can't understand. And Hamas, chose their role and they're doing it. But again, like I refer back to what Titsa Or said, if God wanted him home, like now, he could be home in an instant. It's not like God can't. God can't. I mean, we could think of a million different scenarios through which God can make him emerge from the tunnel and be right back in his living room sitting on his couch. Why he's not doing it, this is where we turn to God and, talking about the right times to cry. This is something that makes us cry and makes us cry a lot and makes us demand from God and ask God, stop hiding your face. There's so many, the words that you quoted, Jerry, they're some beautiful songs and very heart-wrenching songs written about those words. Like, stop hiding your face from us. Like, we can't bear it anymore. Until when? When the Jews shout, Ad Matai, until when? Till when are we supposed to bear the suffering? It's okay. We're allowed to cry. We're allowed to yell at God. We're allowed to be mad at what he's doing. At the same time, we accept that this is what he decreed, and we don't deviate from what we are supposed to do.
I think I remember learning years and years ago, and perhaps I'm remembering it incorrectly, that when the Jews were in Egypt, when they were slaves, God intended for this to happen, for them to be slaves. But if memory serves me, the number of years that they remained in servitude was decreased because of the vehemence that the Egyptians held them in slavery. But then you're saying that, you know, God gave the Egyptians took the role. And God intended, but then I guess his intentions changed because the Egyptians were so ferocious.
So the teaching that you're saying, if I'm remembering the same one, it says that God told Abraham, your children will be in a foreign land for 400 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the Jews were actually slaves in Egypt. That slavery lasted 210 years. So the commentaries there say that God had the opportunity to count 400 years. It could have been from when the slavery started. It could also have been from when Isaac was born, which was like the beginning of this era. It wasn't the difficult part of the era yet, but it was like the beginning of this chapter. So ultimately, God counted 400 years from when Isaac was born, so that the actual slavery was 210 years. Is still, God creates his intention, but he does give us room. I mean, let's talk about, the future redemption. God says by the year 6,000, that's like the end limit, by then I'm going to bring Mashiach. If you guys deserve it, I can do it sooner. You can tap into higher levels of God's desire. And God gives us, that when we say the word Baruch Atah, when we make a blessing. So besides for Baruch meaning to bless, Baruch also is related to the word berech, like ani, like when So when a person bows down, when a person bends their knee, it's related to the concept of drawing down. And Kabbalistic teachings explain that a blessing draws down things that were in potential. So on Rosh Hashanah, God decrees exactly what kind of year we're going to have, how much money a person's going to make, who's going to live and who's going to die, and a whole bunch of things God decrees on Rosh Hashanah. So then you say, so what's the point of doing anything good throughout the year? God decided on Rosh Hashanah, let me just live it up till the next Rosh Hashanah. I don't have to, repent. So the Kabbalistic teachings explain that yes, God has a desire and he has a decree, but there are multiple layers to what God decrees. And our actions can get God to tap into different levels and different layers of his desire. So perhaps on a higher, more spiritual level, God has something really great intended for me, but I'm only going to draw it down if I do enough of the right thing. And if I don't do what God wants me to do, then maybe I'm not going to be able to tap into that level of God's desire and God's blessing. And again, this is so hard for us to understand because we're finite people. When I want something, I want something. You can't, it's hard to describe various levels of what I want and what happens and doesn't happen. We see things as very tangible and very practical. But from God's perspective, there are so many layers to reality and to what happens that we have. I mean, when we say that when we do a mitzvah now, we could bring Mashiach now. If God already decided when Mashiach is going to come because he has everything planned out, then I should just sit back and wait for it to happen. But God does give us the opportunity through our actions to draw down higher levels of revealed good that we can change the course of history. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
I see some people left. I wanted to show, I know we're late, a beautiful clip that I just thought would just a positive ending. So, we're all talking about this future redemption, and when we talk about it, it sounds like this lofty, concept, something from the books. And I love when someone's able to take something like so lofty and make it so tangible. So I saw a clip today where somebody used AI to kind of create imagery of what things might look like when the third temple is rebuilt in Jerusalem and it's 2025. And like we have smartphones and are taking selfies and all of that. So it's a very short clip, but I mean I just had to watch it so many times. I literally felt like it was just so uplifting. So give me 1 second. Let me see if I can pull this up. Some of you might remember a few years ago, my son, Mayor, he was like, I guess it must have been a good few years ago. He was 10 years old at the time. He also, we were talking about the third temple and the future redemption. And we're trying to make it like real. And he came up with this idea of, well, if Mashiach could come like today, then how are people going to know where to go? And there should be a website that kind of tells you where to visit and what are the visiting hours. And there should be like a GPS tracker that can, get you there. And there should be a information post of who's allowed to come and who can't come. And, he ended up creating this website. I'm not sure it's still online. He's a little embarrassed of it now because he feels like, oh, if I would do it now, I would do it so much better. Because, obviously now he's a few years older. But I remember at some point I think it was Tisha B'Av. He did it right before Tisha B'Av, and then we sent the link around, and it like went viral in the Jewish world, and like a whole bunch of people. He got like thousands of hits that Tisha B'Av. But I think that when we're able to see something that we like dream about, like almost become reality, then it's there's something very comforting and beautiful about that. So let me just pull this up. I finally got it. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, guys. 1 second.
I can't hear the sound.
If you could see on, for those who don't read Hebrew, like on the train, on all the traffic signs say, you know, temple, like this is trains going to the temple. I just thought that was a sweet note to end on. It's, you know, our teachings tell us that it's very real and it's very close. And just like the darkest hours of the night is right before dawn, right before the crack of dawn is when it's the darkest. You know, we are experiencing very, very dark times. And we just have to hold on a little bit longer, a little bit stronger. And we know the days are coming. It will be soon. And God willing, we'll all be taking and sharing selfies in Jerusalem with the temple. So may it happen now. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanie. Great class again.